Ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, it is Debate Sensei. We are here to talk about topics relevant to competitive debate, specifically at a college level, but we focus on the things that are kind of like limited prep oriented stuff. We have Matt Shapiro, Esquire.
Hello.
All right. Tim Seavey from California State University, San Diego.
That's not the thing, but that's fine.
Huh?
SD.
That's not the thing? CSU?
SDSU. I don't, there is no
SU.
Is there a difference between Cal State and something state university?
No. That's why whenever you correct me, I'm like, what are you talking about? There's just the UC and the Cal State. Those are the two.
So why is it not Fullerton State University?
They just choose.
Don't ask questions.
Yeah.
There's a comma, and it says Fullerton.
Long Beach is CSULB.
Right.
All right, but San Diego just wants to be San Diego State University. Fine, I will respect your identity choices. All right, SDSU is
identify as the state of San Diego and the university of it.
All right.
Not to be confused with Colorado State, who got
don't
beat
have a great geography
on
program.
Saturday. Yeah, sorry. I think the biggest college football game ever, I bet you, ratings-wise, was on Saturday.
All right. So we are talking today about Rotten Tomatoes and whether or not it's overrated. By the way, that's one of my favorite sort of generic debate topics is just saying X is overrated. It's really formulaic and really easy. That's like really, you can come up with just, hundreds of thousands of these topics, without very little effort. But it's also a different way of looking at a value round. Right? Okay. That's what you're talking about. Overrated. It's like whatever the value of it is higher than it ought to be. And so usually when you talk about value rounds, it's like this versus that. But in this thing, it's what I call I don't know if anyone else calls it this, but like intrinsic value versus comparative value. So this versus that is like a comparative value topic, and this is like an intrinsic value topic. And so it's like, is it valued higher than it ought to be?
In and of itself.
Yeah. So,
I think you could argue there's a comparative element to that because you'll only know how good something is when you know what something else is. But let's keep going. I hear you.
Yeah, no, but just the way it's worded. I'm just going over the words wording, but the burdens can be.
I'm trying to confuse the other team with fancy words and jargon until they forget what they're doing and then capitalize.
I like that this one particularly is determining whether something is overrated that is a rating system.
Yeah,
that actually makes it fun in itself. It's like, what is the Rotten Tomatoes?
It's very meta.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, like, I was toying with the idea of Rotten Tomatoes is rotten. But I'm like, no.
Doesn't make any
sense. Like that it's already a rating system. So, start it out. If that were, it would probably be like a fun IPDA topic, right? Like tend to find those in the strike. I would go for it. I would like this topic. So there is an actual significant financial value to a Rotten Tomatoes score. So movies make more money when their opening weekend has a good Rotten Tomatoes score. Like more people will go see it. Or even when it's just like in preview stages and just critics have seen it before and now people are making decisions like that has a significant sway on where ticket sales go, or potentially streaming or something like that when people are trying to determine which movie to watch. So as a platform of ranking it has a bit of weight. Now I would say that with streaming coming in, there are now more input sources. So like if you look at a Netflix movie, that it'll give you how many people have rated on Netflix on a platform. Well, I think like IMDb has another rating that's supposed to be a little bit more critic driven and less audience driven. But as a channel, like Rotten Tomatoes used to be the really cool way that was like critics ratings and audience ratings, and then you could make your decision based on that. So I like the premise of Rotten Tomatoes. I like it a lot.
Yeah, man, if this were a debate round, and this were the topic, you got to start off by defining some terms, and overrated is always a freaking weighty term. You know what I mean? It's sticky. It's hard to deal with.
It's sticky. It's hard. It's hard to deal with. Jared Miller by Michael Scott. Okay, I'm just kidding.
So I would define that something like
gross.
The audience Gross. So I would say like the.
What were we talking about? Rotten Tomatoes. Yes,
Yeah.
the website that rates movies, not the fruit in your refrigerator. Although you could just go hard and be like, Rotten Tomatoes in my refrigerator are overrated. There are recipes that call for Rotten Tomatoes, and they are disgusting.
You know, the weird thing is like when you do that, I think it actually helps with the definition. But Tim, go ahead, because I think like now the metaphor actually might apply. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say like just straight. Didn't think that I would have to define it, but sure, yeah, I would go for definition of Rotten Tomatoes being the website, and then overrated, the important critical one, being the public perception. So as you said, Jared, you were saying calling it before the intrinsic value. The public perception of this tool is of higher value than it really is. So the intrinsic value is lower than its popular described value or its popularly posed value or something like that. So I think you'd have to start being able to give some kind of barometer of like, this is how much the public views it. So that's where I was coming at it with like, it has actual weight, it moves, numbers, moviegoers look at that. I'm sure that you could find some like Nielsen polls or at least like Google Analytics or something of like, how much traffic does this thing get? Or when movies have a certain score, what is the impact that has on ticket sales? That's where I would define that, like, here's the public value. People value it this much.
Yeah.
Then I would start taking into, like, that is an unfair representation. And I think it's probably, like, yes, it's a value round on, like, this thing is not as good as it, could be. But I still think that you end up using just a bunch of examples to try and test out whether or not it's as good of a source for determining a good movie or not as possible. So I just start throwing out, and like both sides can do this. So it doesn't make for super like deep debate, but I would just start throwing out a bunch of examples of movies that are freaking great movies that Rotten Tomatoes has terrible scores for. And be like, there, I don't agree with their values. If you don't agree with their values, then we don't agree that Rotten Tomatoes is helpful.
Well, I think there's another strategy. I do think that would be like half of my strategy. And then there's another half that would like, so when you're talking about value, I like the way you're doing it, right? Because it sets up a criteria where it's like, all right, so you might even do a little background before you get into the criteria. You're like, all right, so if we're going to estimate its value, it increases ticket sales. I mean, do you have any idea how much it increases ticket sales? Have they done an estimate?
I have to do that math, but I'm sure I can find it.
Yeah. So, I wonder if ChatGPT knows. How much does Rotten Tomatoes affect ticket sales?
The director of USC's Data and Analytics Project concluded in 2017 that Rotten Tomatoes scores have never played a very big role in driving box office performance either positively or negatively. So that's interesting.
Tim was lying.
So
that's
point of order.
USC. So actually, we're throwing that out right away because that's not a real place.
No, but like, okay, so you can use that to your advantage on the affirmative. It's not that like overrated doesn't intrinsically means that it's highly rated. It could be lowly rated and it's still accurately rated. It's about accuracy, not level. You understand?
Okay.
And so if you're saying it's overrated, it's like, first off, the public doesn't really value it that much and it's not that valuable, right? So like,
but if I'm on the affirmative, I still have to prove that it is overrated. So even
right,
if the public value is low, it is still more valuable than it should be.
I totally got it backwards. So if it was lowly rated at the beginning, you have to say that it's like 0, that there's like, like, and so I guess that does kind of hurt the affirmative. I meant that it helps the negative. Yeah. Okay.
You could probably take advantage on the affirmative of kind of highlighting how important people think it is. Because that way you can kind of really set up how you're like, look, people call this the end-all be-all of movie reviews. People think on national television and radio, you'll hear people tell the Rotten Tomatoes score as if it is some indication of how good the movie is. And that's why it's overrated, because we think X, it's not, or whatever. If it's substantive in that matter, being literally saying the score is not indicative of how good the movie is, I mean, later on in the round, we should talk about, or maybe now, like some Rotten Tomato scores are so low, I watched the movie because it's interesting to me how bad a movie could be rated. Like, I'm like, wow, That is such a bad score. So
Yeah.
I kind of wonder, data wise, if the tomato score gets like the highest rated probably gets the most, and then the middle average of the, what's the thing called? I forget.
With that piece of data, I might actually go a different direction then, right? Like, because what the New York Magazine came out with an article, and it was talking about how, was it Ophelia, which is a sort of
girl in your closet. Okay, yeah, let her go, Jared. Let her go.
An all-female version of Hamlet, an all-female, right? And so it started off with bad reviews, and then the media, their marketing team, just went hard for Rotten Tomatoes. They were getting like a 40%, and if they push it over 60%, then it goes from rotten to fresh. Mm-hmm. And so when they got it over 60%, they were able to like sell the rights to some place that it was like, oh, okay, well now it's considered a good movie. And so that might be the value. It's like, how much money do marketing teams put into it?
The filmmakers themselves, how much can they sell their rights to their movie for?
Right. Yeah. And so you see, like, that could be like, if you have a difficult statistic, like if it's saying, oh, it's not really valued all that much, you're like, well, other people, there are places where
I feel like that'd be a great neg argument. I mean, you'd be like, yeah, this is selling, this score can help a artist make more money, so that's good. I believe in I'm pro artist, unlike Jared over here, but
Okay,
anyways.
yeah, it's an interesting direction on it. So I was mistaken that it moves ticket sales, but it may move things like DVD sales or like after.
Streams,
or whatever the like
DVD sales. Tim, what's the clock? What year are you living in? When's the last time you rented a DVD? I mean, we should just have a
getting mailed out
intervention right now.
Yeah. So
do you have a DVD player handy right now?
Well, the problem is it's attached to my VHS right
That's
now.
Jesus, goodness
DVD,
gracious.
VHS. I have the recorder.
I haven't heard the words DVD in a while. Like renting it. People don't even know what that means on this channel. Hopefully, all 6 million of you.
Now, if you looked at our demographics, all of them know exactly what it is. We get the older crowd.
Yeah. Well, they're into me for different reasons. So DVD sales, all those, it all goes well. Secondary, we'll call it second market sales, because like movies still also in like there are lesser theaters that are not your like big box like AMC and Edwards that pick up movies after they go to their like primary rounds, and I imagine they might use a metric like Rotten Tomatoes as one of their methods of determining what movies to pick up and which ones not to. They probably go off things like ticket sales because they want to make money too, but maybe they're more artsy or something, but they're also not very highbrow, so they're not going to watch the movies themselves. They use Rotten Tomatoes as proxy.
Or definitely the little theaters that have like, I'll let you speak. I'm sorry, Tim, but it just reminded me of like that whole genre of theater that kind of like they play all kinds of movies. They don't necessarily play the ones that are out right now. And there are a lot of cult following movies, which you may learn about on Rotten Tomatoes. So who knows?
So therein lies an interesting point. So I just wanted to steer the conversation to let's fight about some things Rotten Tomatoes has rated. Cult following movies receive just bludgeoning scores oftentimes on Rotten Tomatoes.
Bad scores.
That is right? Spaceballs has a 57%. I'm sorry, I strongly disagree with that. Hocus Pocus has a 38%. That is false. That's like the best Halloween movie. Hook, another phenomenal. Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman, Hook, 29%. These are wrong. These are bad scores. They are incorrect. Like it's not a subjective, like they feel, I feel. They are wrong. They are incorrect. It is a better film than that objectively.
I like that. You're like, listen, I'm gonna lay out like 4 movies. All right. And I bet you, like if 3 out of 4 of these movies you think are underrated by Rotten Tomatoes, that means Rotten Tomatoes is overrated. There you go. Boom. There's a
question. Okay, so that is revenue. I think you can also go the other way. So I like the definition of overrated. In terms of it is a rating system, you could say that there are too many good reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. As a review system, people put in too high of ratings. It is overrated. And I would just give a bunch of garbage movies that have really high ratings because those examples exist too. So like if you really thought that Cars 3 was worth 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, so I just start throwing out a bunch of bad.
You don't have a 2-year-old. See, that's why it's not. You don't understand. Like, what if I could give you peace and harmony for 2 hours?
Yeah.
How much is that worth? That's an 89%. I'm surprised, not 100%.
That's how much sleep they got because of that movie. They got 80% of a full night's sleep. That's like...
You can just play it on repeat, and they do the same thing over and over and over. You don't even need to parent your kids anymore. It's great. Thank you, Tom Hanks, and Woody Allen. Yeah. Not Woody Allen, Tim Allen. And Woody Allen.
That's toys. You said this was Cars.
I know. I'm thinking Toy Story. Yeah. Toys is a crazy movie. Go watch that movie. What's that got Rotten Tomatoes? That's probably got like a 99.9 for the 6 people who reviewed it.
All right. So another affirmative that you could go for, though, is that the critic pool is overrated, meaning that the sort of the weight
the general public is overrated. Really?
No. That they don't represent the public very well, and this is where you start getting into gender and ethnic diversity.
What if it's not the public is the public who uses Rotten Tomatoes?
Huh?
Well, no, that's it. It's the selection bias.
Yeah, that's
people that use Rotten
Tomatoes. Sure that's the same thing.
Yeah, they're not representative of moviegoers or your average person, which is like there are 2 scores. There's the critic score, and then there is the public score on Rotten Tomatoes. So you can maybe pick one of those and just say, like, this score is not representative of the greater populace. Like, this is not what people think. And yet, here things are overblown. Good example of this. Fun little neat anecdote. The first Suicide Squad movie. Remember, like, what a just cultural icon that was for a hot minute? Like, Margot Robbie and Jared Leto was the Joker. So that movie went to trailer, and the trailer production company, because there's like different production companies for different things. So the company that just made the trailer crushed that trailer so hard. It was the highest rated trailer. Like, it received like the most views, was the most engaged trailer that had ever been put out. So DC freaked out and took the movie from the production company that was making the actual movie and gave it to the preview house. So the production, like the company that just makes the trailer, got to take over the entire movie, which is why it is so horrible. They'd never done it. It does not make sense unless you watch it in 30-second stints, because they're great at making an entire story happen in 30 seconds and like make you enticed and like put the right formula together. But that doesn't work for telling an entire story. It makes absolutely no sense because it's so fragmented and all over the place in different styles, and it's a mess. So that's why they had to like completely reboot the whole film. That, interestingly, has like one of the lowest critic scores ever on Rotten Tomatoes. Yet it has like one of the highest fan scores. Like, the differential between critic and fan scores is huge. So that begs the question, like, is Suicide Squad a good movie? That should be our debate topic for next week.
Now I love it actually when people boil it down. It's like, let's just do one case study, something where it has ground on both sides. It really encapsulates the idea, the sort of essence of the topic, and let's just fight it out over this one case study, and whoever wins the case wins the round. So it's like, listen, I'm going to take the side that Suicide Squad is significantly better than what Rotten Tomatoes said it was, and you can say that no, it wasn't. How about that?
How about that?
I mean, or you can just take the side of critics and be like, no, it was terrible, I agree with the critics, right. Or it was great, I agree with the public. Like, it became a central issue in just how like hilarious the outcome of that movie was, because it still made a lot of money, but they put a huge amount of marketing into it. So the other the part of the drama of it was that it received just absolute garbage critic scores upon like opening weekend, and then audiences were pissed about that, and so they like blew it up. Now, I don't know how much of that was the production studio saying like, God, we need to get these ratings up, and they just like financially incentivize people to make reviews or something. I don't know how you're able to filter a legit versus fake review on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, their engine might not be that strong, and like if you get 100,000 people motivated to go write a review because they're going to get a free popcorn or something like that.
$50.
Yeah, you might get yourself a lot of reviews. So I think like I would probably take issue with review aggregator scores anywhere. Like, anytime something is supposed to be like a collective vote, like lots of people said that this is the best thing, that's not a good system. Like, it's not real, because it has to be incentivized, or people are skewed, or, selection bias, or, where the audience is pulled from. So I think that would be my argument on the affirmative, is like any collective review source is inherently flawed.
The neg, I think, would have good ground here in just, the F. Just saying what we kind of said in the beginning when we read it off the website somewhere. We didn't get the exact statistics, but someone literally said Rotten Tomatoes scores does not affect box office sales that much. I wonder if it affects streams, because that would be kind of interesting. But the fact is if it doesn't affect if people go see your movie, then in a weird way, I would say the metric fails. It's like, well, I mean, the whole point is to lead people to go see, quote unquote, what Rotten Tomatoes classifies as good movies. That may not be their goal, but it seems like that's the inherent implication of what will happen if you tell people it's a bad movie. So, I mean, if it doesn't serve its own function of like preventing bad movies from being made by discouraging people to seeing maybe directors or actors who aren't doing well, so the marketplace of ideas and the dollar in their pockets don't go to those movies, which would make only good movies according to Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, it's not doing that, if according to Wikipedia.
Yeah, it's like a lot of the affirmative seems to just revolve around, is it accurate, right? It's like, just if it's not, then it's overrated. Like, sort of like that seems to be the fundamental thing. And if I was on the affirmative, I think I'm gravitating more towards the diversity and representation. Like, I start, looking up some of the names who've been calling for the change, and like Ava DuVernay, Spike Lee, Gina Davis Institute, like critics like this and organizations, as well as film festivals like the Toronto Film Festival and stuff like that. It starts building a lot of literature, I think, that you can actually cite, you know what I mean? That's not, and now it's not so much about, well, how good are the movies? It's kind of like, listen, like Rotten Tomatoes is made up of a certain group of critics that don't represent or don't have the same representation as the group of moviegoers. And so that's why it's bad. And like all the production choices that come about because of that, you can now start talking about how it affects movie making, right? It's like, well, we're not going to, like that's what they're talking about, like having all female casts on things. It's like, well, we can't sell it to Rotten Tomatoes, so we're not going to do it.
One neg argument for sure is just that Rotten Tomatoes is a humongous website that has a humongous base of people putting input into it, right? So everything you're saying about like limited, who are these people who are putting in their information, rating these movies, they have a huge sample size. So I would guess that because I did a lot of research for today, that any review site like Netflix itself, like Tim brought up, is much smaller. There's way less people, I would imagine, rating movies. I've never rated a movie on either, to be honest with you, but like I would imagine there's more people who care about movies are going on Rotten Tomatoes to see if they're good and review them. Whereas on Netflix, you're just clicking through and you click it, and once you watched it, you might rate it afterwards, but most of the time you're moving on to something else. So, I mean, I think what I'm just trying to say is all the problems you're saying about movie reviews are inherent in the movie review process no matter where you go. So the fact is that it's so big. On the neg, you could say it's not overrated, even with all these problems, because the sample size alone is so large. The number of reviewers is so large that it's the best of the worst. It's the best of all these things that have this problem. So, I mean, it's a big time website. It's, the Siskel and Ebert reminds me of those. Like, I kind of caught a little bit of that when I was younger. Like, people would watch that and they would be like, oh, these people think this is good movies, 2 thumbs up, 1 thumb up, all that stuff. So, I mean, this is like, there is no more Siskel and Ebert. I'm pretty sure one of them unfortunately passed away.
Like, do you mean?
Oh, are they still? I mean, I haven't seen them on TikTok. I haven't seen them on YouTube. I haven't seen them on, Channel 3 or whatever they're doing these days. Like, if they're still doing it, there's probably a very limited number of people watching those people at this point. So
you gotta get back on AM radio, my brother. That's where all the good.
Someone needs to call their social media person and fire them and get some new people going, because the market is there. People are watching a bunch of movies. I'm watching more movies than I ever watched in my life. You know what I mean? So
sadly,
accessible.
Social media person doesn't have a phone. You can only.
Yeah, he's on a flip phone. He's on a Razor phone from 2006.
Okay, so I started this episode talking about the difference between intrinsic value resolutions and comparative value. But like Matt said, you can just kind of make it into a comparative value. And the one that I think would just pops right to mind is, Rotten Tomatoes is overrated compared to what? Like other movie critics? Like they have their problems.
Ebert and Roper?
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like maybe they could be bribed. They could have personal vendettas against like a lot of things can influence it that we will never know, right? On why they have rated it. It's like they could have something that has nothing to do with the movie, but they don't like the producer because they slept with his wife or something. And so he's like,
boom.
I always rate their movies low, and then there's no way to check that.
Right.
I mean, somebody has the credibility for it, and so at least Rotten Tomatoes is transparent about that, and rating things based on an aggregate it means that you in statistics you start regressing toward the mean, which means that you start going towards the average, right? It's like the more data that you get, the more confident you can be in its results. Whereas if you happen to follow one critic, you don't know all the things going into their decisions.
The level of influence on less people, I mean, is it's easier to skew numbers with less people. I think that's fair. I mean, so for that reason, like I was saying, it's kind of a neg argument for sure. It's not overrated. It's strong. It's good. Even if it's bad, these things are ubiquitous in any rating system. So the more information, the more statistically accurate it will be, and we can continue to build our brand and get more people to review movies, and it will only increase the product.
So Jared, you point out an interesting challenge where it's like if you make it comparative, like Rotten Tomatoes is overrated compared to, and then some alternative. That feels like that's adding language to the resolution. If I were to say Rotten Tomatoes is overrated, and then as the affirmative, and I define that to mean it is overrated compared to IMDb, and IMDb ratings are better, and then here's a whole bunch of reasons why. That feels like that is adding to the resolution, like making it extra topical, right? Or it's not like a plan, but that's probably how I would argue it on the negative side is like, you changed the resolution to be something different and you expanded it. You didn't contract it. So
but
that's
when you say the word overrated, right? I mean, you need to have Jared's initial thing was saying
word.
Yeah. How do you measure a rating? Like how do you I would say that
your point really quick. I'm sorry, Jared. You said intrinsically, so what that means is, in and out of itself, if all you ever knew was just this thing, that's kind of one way I kind of framed it in my head when I was listening to him talk about intrinsic. It's compared to itself and nothing else was what he was trying to attempt to say. That's what this is. We're not talking about something else. But I can't help but think there's no way. You cannot consider something overrated if you don't know that it can be replaced. I mean, if all you have to eat are apples and you cannot eat anything else, you're on an island with just apples. Apples may suck, but they're not overrated. That's all you have. You have to have it. If you want a movie rating, this is the only way to get it. Is it overrated? I mean, I would say no. But once you can compare it to Netflix, to you just said IMDb, I think that opens up the door to actually proving if it's overrated. So I'm kind of arguing with the intrinsic value part, because the only way we'd be able to argue that is to say there's an alternative, or there are other things that do similar things that are better. Therefore, its hype is overrated. I mean, I can go both ways. I can see it.
I think it's a much more direct route. All you have to do is define overrated, saying that people rate Rotten Tomatoes over individual critics.
And Tim, to your point, I think you better be careful saying it's better than IMDb. Like if that's what you're if you're neg and you're like, it's better than Rotten Tomatoes is better than IMDb. Well, I mean, just make sure you definitely bring that back to Rotten Tomatoes is not overrated, and evidence of that being it's better than IMDb.
What I was trying to say was that if you're going to say overrated, is that Rotten Tomatoes is considered the number one source people go to when they're making their decisions. And so my saying is like, it's no better than anything else. It's no better than an individual critic. It is no better than IMDb. It is. That's what I mean by overrated. That like people can put it on this pedestal as being like the best way to make decisions about movies, but it's crap, right? You know what I mean? It's just as crappy as an individual critic.
Mm.
And so that I don't think that would be adding it at all. That's just clarifying how the criteria works, right? It's like, how do we know when something is overrated? It's rating means that you're kind of comparing shit, you know what I mean, to like a standard, right? And so it's like, and so if this one is higher than the thing next to it, then those things are on the rating system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta find the Lost Boys. Gotta find the Lost Boys. Gotta find the Lost Boys. Gotta find the Lost Boys.
Oh man,
I would also give this episode about a 29% on a Rotten Tomatoes score. Like if I just had to, I had to give it a score. This one.
Yeah, I wonder what our show would get. It'd be like a solid, 1.
High
7.
critic score, terrible public score.
Yeah.
Low point win.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Hey, that is our episode. Please join us again. We will talk more about topics that are relevant to potential limited debate rounds. All right. It is Matt, Tim, and Jared for Debate Sensei.
Take care.
See you later.